everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today, again, we have Amp on, and we are going to be talking about some very, I don't know if it's nebulous necessarily, but a very interesting topic. We're going to be talking about the differences in BDSM, reality versus fantasy, and in porn, in media, and in general in our lives as kinky people. What are the differences and where do fantasy and reality come together? But before we get into that topic first, just for maybe people who haven't seen our other videos together or maybe aren't familiar with your channel, would you mind giving a little introduction and telling the audience about who you are?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Amp. I am from the YouTube channel What's a Safe Word? We make kink and kind of comedy, educational things on the internet. Kind of similar to Evie, but I do it with my partner, and we always kind of put a little weird internet spin on it.
They're very punny.
Yeah, there's always lots of jokes. So if you enjoy puns and sex positivity and just hilarity in that regard, and Evie, because Evie just shot with us over there, go check us out. But otherwise, I'm just here to have a wonderful conversation with other sex positive people.
So when you got started in the BDSM community, was there anything that stuck out right away, or maybe that you learned over time is like, whoa, this is totally different from like what I thought it was because of the fantasies that I had or like the media representations I had been given?
Sure. So like my intro to kink was getting tied up, like cops and robbers as kids. There was nothing sexual whatsoever, but it was like you got captured and like tied up. It was really bad bondage. But like I felt something. Yeah. You know, I felt like, oh, this is weird. Why? Like I've never felt this before. I was turned on. But like I've never felt that before as like a 12 or 13-year-old. So as I became legal and older, started watching kink porn, I saw bondage, I saw kink.com, I saw people being suspended and flogged, and it looked like fun, even though they were in pain. And that was kind of like my, ooh, I like this. This is different. Why is my very vanilla boyfriend not doing this to me? So kink offered a different kind of relationship and a lifestyle that I'd never even seen before, even in media. Yeah.
Yes, you'd never even really like seen it represented at that point at all.
Not at all. And that was only on the internet.
Yeah.
Until I met a puppy and his daddy on a camping trip. It was like friends of friends.
Yeah.
So that was my first intro to puppy play. And that was the first time I saw it in action as two people in a relationship. There was no nudity, it was not sex, it wasn't porn. It was just two people that shared a connection that was way deeper than any boyfriend I've ever had. Because there was no stigmas there around their sexuality or what they were into sexually. They were very open, and they were just like, they had this like unwritten or unspoken like communication between them. Like little eye contacts or like head nod, like little tiny cues that you just saw they were really deeply connected.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the main misconceptions, or maybe something that doesn't really get represented in media a lot, is like a loving, deep connection in BDSM. Because I think that's missing from porn, because you don't have the like 2 hours of filming beforehand to establish the relationship and build the tension, and so it makes sense maybe why that's not represented. But I think it gets presented as almost kind of detached in a lot of ways, and it's about the actions themselves, not necessarily about having that sort of loving relationship where like the eye contact and the subtle hand motions and everything, and that just very deep connection I have not really seen a lot in media about BDSM.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to like ethically made kink porn, like kink.com does a really good job of having the before, like the scene, they have like a little like interview, which is kind of awkward, but like you get the sense of like, oh, they're there, they're having a good time. And then the after you see all those marks, after you see someone like really go through that ringer, and you just see like the two models like hands up around each other, like joking, touching, really sensually, like we had a good time. So I'm really appreciative of that kind of after the fact. You don't see it as much as I wish you would.
Yeah, and I think there's also sort of a difference between like two people who had an intense experience and are like kind of bonding over that versus like having a long established relationship represented.
Absolutely.
And there are people who make independent porn, who make independent media as a couple, especially on Tumblr and independent sites where they're like, this is our lifestyle and we're sharing it with the world, which is great. But again, unless you're already sort of aware of the lifestyle, you're probably not going to have access to that kind of media where you know that that's actually what's happening, not just a narrative to like establish the porn before it starts, if that makes sense.
It's true, but I mean, coming away from porn, though, you also have people like yourself, because you're very open about your kinks and relationships online, as are myself and my partner. There's a few people out there that kind of provide that behind the veil, like pull back the leather, and this person actually is a real living person with feelings and emotions and complexities.
And interests besides BDSM, as it turns out sometimes.
Absolutely. Wait, what? You have interests outside?
Yeah, I have like hobbies and stuff. I don't know.
I can't be here. I gotta go.
Not pure enough. I think doing YouTube and having this as like a medium where we can share BDSM has really improved sort of how people can see what BDSM is. I don't know if you get this question at all on your channel, but something I run into a lot is people are deeply confused about if I'm dating my partner or not. Like, they don't know, like, they can't differentiate, like, is this just a BDSM thing? Is this, like, an actual relationship? Like, which is, like,
put
so...
quotes on it.
Yeah, it's like, are you guys in a real relationship, or is this, like... And it's very confusing. And I'm not blaming anybody who has this question, because I think it's... You guys deserve to know, and I think it's important to kind of challenge your conceptions of, like, what a relationship can look like.
Yeah.
But I do very oftentimes get questions from people who don't necessarily know where the romance begins and the BDSM ends, or like if those two can even really interact together.
Would you say that there was like 50 Shades of Grey in between the two?
Yes. Yes, there.
Well, to answer your question, like Christopher, my partner, my daddy, we actually get a lot of funny questions all the time. It's not are they in a relationship? It's like, is this his actual father? Like, we actually get that question a lot more than the relationship question, which is funny. Because it's a little confusing. It's unclear if you've just tuned into a random episode that was recommended to you when it actually gets recommended. It can be confusing because it just looks like two guys having a good time and joking, but you're not sure if there's a sexual undertone.
Yeah, and I think that's confusing too, is like you never, because it's a very unique form of intimacy, if you haven't sort of experienced it yourself or had a direct connection to it, it's hard to kind of wrap your brain around, okay, these are sort of the kinds of intimacy I'm familiar with. What category does this that I'm seeing fit into? And when you don't have that kind of box available to put it in, where you know how to identify it, it gets really confusing. You're like, okay, wait, well, it's not really this, but it's not this, but it's kind of both of these.
It's like a Venn diagram.
Yeah, and I think it's important to share and to let people know that you can have BDSM, you can have romance, you can have a sexual relationship, or you can just be friends and like have all of these things like linked up and like have this really fulfilling relationship, or you can just be friends and like play together, or you can just be sexual partners, or any combination thereof. I think BDSM is not, there's no one true way, right? You can make your own relationship.
Well, and that's where the fantasy and reality, when the only thing that we can see is the fantasy or the porn, we don't know, I mean, there's no reality TV stars that are like out kinky, like there's no show like that, you know?
I would love that show.
I would be all over that
Somebody
show.
make that.
Yeah, please, call us. Well, but like that fantasy versus reality disconnect is what makes it so difficult for some people to even wrap their mind around, can I be kinky? Like, I had a conversation the other day with someone that was like, well, I want to do this, but I don't feel like I have permission. And I was like, well, who are you waiting for permission from? Like, do you want me to give you permission? I'll give you permission to go and be kinky, but like, it's that entry level of like, well, I don't feel like I deserve to have this, or I feel like I need permission from a professional to even get into this. Like, no, you don't need to. So long as you're being consenting, you're doing it with other responsible adults, you're not hurting anyone, everyone's having fun and is negotiating or at least discussing what's going to happen. There's no other permission you need beyond that person's consent, you know?
Yeah, there's no kink board out there that's like, okay, we reviewed your application, and we see here that you haven't read this book yet, and it seems you haven't gone to these classes yet, so unfortunately this time, we're going to be revoking your application. Yeah. You know, that's not a thing.
There's no BDSM police that like knocks down their, bam, you are not practicing this properly, like.
And I'm sure somebody has a kink for that and they want that to happen. But in reality, there's not any sort of steps you need to take to like be allowed to do BDSM other than like being the Asian majority of like wherever you live. Like, please don't take this as permission to like, okay, I'm 16, I'm just gonna go to the local BDSM dungeon. Like, don't do that.
No,
obviously.
We're not giving any permission to underage individuals. We're not giving you any permission to do anything to anyone that they have not consented to. We are just simply giving you permission to explore what makes you happy in a legal and responsible way. Don't get it twisted.
Yeah, like it's you can be a BDSM person, and you don't need anybody else's permission to like embrace what drives you. You know, if you are like really into bondage, if you're really into like role play or whatever, like you can go out and research that. You can do that without having to like get permission from anybody else. You can just explore and like find out what drives you and what makes you feel fulfilled. What do you see that people commonly have misconceptions about when they get started in the community of like, oh, I didn't know this was going to be a thing, or I thought this was going to be really different?
Sure. Well, it's like coming back around like full circle to like the porn aspect.
Yeah.
Like I've done plenty of porn and adult videos with kink.com, and there's a certain undertone, especially on social media, when someone sees that I've done those videos, all of a sudden there is this like overly sexual like conversation that happens where they're like, oh, well, I just want to slap you around and throw you around like in that video, yeah, you dirty pig, which, you know, is fine if I'm into that.
Yeah.
But like there's that undertone of, well, if you've done porn or you're an adult performer, like you can just have anything done to you, or I can do anything to someone who's into that.
Yeah.
Like what you're not seeing off camera necessarily is I've signed paperwork that says it's okay if the top does this, it's okay if the top does that. I've initialed every little line to make sure that this person has consent legally, as well as they have permission to show this content.
Yeah.
Like in reality, you know, we have a conversation, be it on social media or on a dating app with the person we're into, and we negotiate that so that whatever happens has been talked about, has been negotiated, has been consented upon. And so that's where that's one of the biggest ones, is like, you don't just get to grab someone and all of a sudden start doing awful things.
You are my slave now.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't get to do that. Yeah, I think that's one of the big things too, is like consent is sexy. And I think a lot of times people, because, you know, and kink.com is good about this, but not everywhere is, about establishing the consent, ongoing during the scene. And I've seen the things where it's clear that like somebody says red in the porn and then they keep going, or like they ignore safe words on purpose, or they establish it like I'm going to do whatever I want to you and nothing you say will stop this. And so a lot of times I think people get this understanding that like if you identify as submissive, that gives people blanket permission to do whatever they want to at any time. Whereas I think in reality that is a very specific relation type, and even then you negotiate that beforehand if it is going to be something that you're doing.
Yeah, and you tell them what it looks like when you're getting near the end of your rope,
or
when you're getting exhausted. What does it look like when you're having a good time or you're pleasurable? Like a boner, or like there's not always a visual enhancement of like I'm having a good time. Sometimes I can be, as a gay man, I can be completely soft and I'm still having a really good time and I'm in a great headspace. But you don't see that aftercare, like you were saying. Like I've had questions before where we were talking about a really intense scene and someone was like, yeah, but they didn't have aftercare. They just went right into that. And I was like, no. That person was just suspended upside down for 30 minutes. They came down for a good hour before going back up again. Like, they weren't suspended upside down for an hour. There is aftercare, there's downtime, and there should be time for that sub or that bottom, even the top, to come back to reality and to get centered again before you go on to the next thing.
Yeah, the magic of editing makes it seem like there's this continuous stream of things that happen where maybe you took a break, or it was 2 different days of filming, or like all of these different things that can happen, because I think it is about creating a fantasy, and so sometimes that means going beyond what you would normally be able to do in like a more realistic setting by using the power of technology and time to make things like seem like they're lasting for a lot longer than they really are. Or especially making bondage look more intense than it really is, or making pain look more intense than it really is. There is a degree of acting that happens.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you know, and I think it's important to realize that when you are consuming media, like, be critical about it. Like, and especially if you're a new top or a new dom, I think if your primary avenue for getting started in BDSM is having consumed pornography, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but you can't then go into the community, find a submissive, and then expect to be able to replicate your favorite porn.
Correct. There is a level of like, this is what I like, and it's really useful in being like, this is what I'm into, look at this, but then having an expectation, a realistic expectation of like, but, okay, we need to be conscious of this person's limits. How flexible are they? Like, not everyone is like a porn star that can just take everything right away.
Or, you know, they don't have the magic of video editing to like make it seem, or like certain angles even. There's all those sorts of little things that go into it. And again, to create that fantasy that maybe isn't actual, like, obtainable in reality. So something else I want to make sure that we talk about is maybe when you're interacting with media online, especially on places like Tumblr and Instagram, how can you differentiate fantasy versus reality? And I think this is really important for people who are getting into kink and wanting to learn. How can you tell what resources are actually giving you legitimate information versus somebody writing out their favorite wank fantasy?
Sure. I mean, I think it's always important. Social media is almost like a reference point sometimes.
Yeah.
You can tell credibility a little bit based on who's following who and the interactions that they have with people. I mean, nice little verified check marks are nice, but I'm not going to assume that anyone that's in the kink or sex positive realm has one of those.
Yeah.
Very few of them do. But that's always a nice thing to check, is that, that verified, or like their social media links, making sure that they have a credible, like maybe they have a website, emails, they have references from people. Asking people that you know if they know something about someone else, like using actual references is really helpful.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like an in-person sort of thing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think for online consumption, I think it's important to be critical, and I think it's also really good to have multiple points of reference for the same thing. Even if you can't verify if this specific person is legit, can you find like multiple sources for the same thing? Like maybe you want to learn about how do you throw a flogger. It's probably not a good idea to just learn that from one person on the internet, but if you can go to multiple people and kind of assimilate their advice and see, okay, generally what is the overall advice for this? Does anything like completely conflict? And there are also a lot of like legitimate resources online that are for education. There's the Kink Academy, which is a really great website. Something that I do if I'm looking for a book is whatever subject it is, BDSM, bondage, whatever, Amazon, books, and then I filter out anything that's below 4.5 stars. And and I mean, just
use the system.
Use the system, like read reviews for things. If it is something like a book or an article, read the comments on it and see, is there anybody who has like a really strong disagreement? Is there something that's coming up a lot that a lot of people have criticism about? Numbers is not necessarily always indicative of truth.
No.
So if you see something that has 10,000 reblogs, that information can still be false.
Totally, especially on Tumblr.
Yeah, and that's kind of mostly what I'm thinking of is like Tumblr is just saturated with information, and not all of it is good. Because not everybody has the resources or knows where to go to look to like double check something.
Everyone's got an opinion online, but everyone also has an asshole. Like that doesn't make it like the perfect resource for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's again why I think it's important when you can to go to real life events, to talk to people who are like professional educators, people who their job is to go to conferences to talk to people about this. The dungeon that I'm going to has probably verified this person. They've probably fact-checked who this person is. I can go through and I can see, what has this person taught out before? What have they written before? What do people on FetLife say about them? All of those things can be really great tools to find out, is this going to be legitimate? Is this somebody just trying to pass off their fantasy as like the BDSM Bible, which is something that happens a lot, is you get the people, especially, I don't want to blame tops solely for this because it's a problem across the spectrum, but I think there's a lot of information that gets put out there by tops about this is what a true submissive is, and in order to be a submissive, you must do this. Anything that is the one true way, this is the way you have to do it, unless it's like baseline safety information, like if you do rope bondage, you should have safety shears on hand. Like if it's beyond that, there's really not anything that's like, in order to be a submissive, you need to learn these 25 positions, and you need to like, all of that kind of stuff is up to your own personal desires for your own relationship, not what some random guy on the internet is saying you need to do.
Yeah, there's a difference between being a dom and just being dominant. One is respectful and consensual and is negotiated. The other is just aggressive.
Yeah.
And I do think that actually touches base on like, if something feels a little weird, I always trust that gut feeling. Your gut feeling is a very important feeling that you should always follow. If you're feeling a little uneasy or a little skeptical, by all means, you should take your time through that. I don't want there to be any, like, I call it collar blindness. COLLAR, like when someone wants a collar, they want to be a submissive so bad that they'll just jump into any relationship and they're blind to every other fact until something starts to go wrong. Like you should always take your safety in consideration first and be skeptical, like you said. Be very critical and check references and make sure this person is not only safe but sane and consensual.
Yeah, and I think it's important if you're interacting with somebody online, Tumblr, FetLife, what have you, be conscious of the information that you put out there about yourself. And something you should make sure to watch is like, is this person just telling me what I want to hear? Are they creating the fantasy that I want out of a dominant to get me into a relationship? Because unfortunately there are unethical people out there who use BDSM websites and people who are desperate for submission as a tool to manipulate others and to get money from them for their own like sick pleasure. It's you know, I don't want to scare anybody off of using the internet for BDSM, but it is something to be aware of like, again, be critical, be thoughtful. Is somebody just telling you what they think that you want to hear in order to get what they want?
Yeah. Take your own consideration and safety first at all times. Be kind, conscious, and like conscientious of the other person, but like your safety comes first.
Yes. Yeah, your safety should always come first. Be very wary of people who try to tell you things like you're not allowed to have a safe word or like not establishing good consent practices, anything like that. Like, there are relationships where people don't use safe words. There are relationships where people have what's called blanket consent. But that's not something you do day one having a Tumblr conversation.
No.
Or day 30. Or like, in general, that's something that takes a lot of time to build up to.
My relationship with my partner is that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
But that's because we've been together for going on 5 years, and we've done everything under the sun. We've already had all those conversations.
Yeah.
So that is in place. That's not going to be happening within the first, hopefully, couple weeks with someone that you're playing with.
Yeah, and I think that it goes into the reality of fantasy versus kink, right? Is I think some people have the expectation of they're going to get into BDSM and they're going to find this relationship and suddenly they're going to be able to like do all of these things. But I think in order to be as safe as possible and to hopefully have a really healthy relationship, you have to kind of slow down, talk about things, baby step in. You don't just like, okay, BDSM relationship.
Go.
I'm covered now. I have no safe words and no limits, and that's just how life is. Like you build these things up. You have to build your skill set over time. It's unfortunately not overnight. I'm sure most of us, if we had like a little kink fairy godmother, we'd just be like, please make me an expert at this thing. But we don't have that, unfortunately.
No, but we do have the internet. We do have real life munches and people that we can talk to. And there's a really good community. That's what I'm really glad about. Like, regardless of fantasy and reality, like the community that exists out there, the real people, is so well tightly knit, well versed, well connected. Like, people know people, and you can always find someone who's credible, responsible, and knows their shit in this community.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big resources to kind of transitioning from your fantasy to your reality is getting involved in your local BDSM community, meeting people, going to munches. I know not everybody has those resources. Sometimes you have to travel. Sometimes you have to reserve a long weekend to drive to a convention. Sometimes it's harder than others, but if you can utilize that resource, that is like the number one way, I think, to having a successful, positive experience when entering BDSM, is to be able to meet face-to-face with people and be able to see this is what the lifestyle is like. This is how people in the lifestyle actually do all of this stuff that I've been fantasizing about for 10 years, you know?
It takes time.
Time. Well, was there anything else you wanted to add to this conversation before we wrap up today?
I think we covered it all.
Yeah.
Every topic.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot out there, and I'm sure there's maybe other things you guys have questions about. So if you do, if there's anything you want to follow up on, please let us know. Leave a comment down below in the comment section. And if you want to see more from us, subscribe to his channel. Hopefully you like mine too, and you want to subscribe to mine. So you can do that kind of somewhere on the screen right now.
Leave a like, or the BDSM police will knock down your doors.
Yeah, like this. I've never done a like this video but hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. And until I see you guys next time, hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Bye.